You got 3 aces. Oh, yeah, good hand. Oh, not that kind of aces. Oh, yeah. That's not good at all, then. Okay. March 21st, 1941. It's good to have an intelligence service, right? Spies and agents that can monitor the enemy or a possible future enemy to keep tabs on what they're up to. The thing about such a service, though, is that it's not much use when you don't believe what they tell you. I'm Indy Neidell. This is World War II. Last week, the Americans signed Lend-Lease into law, allowing the U.S. to supply other nations, mainly Britain, as much war material as they like regardless of cash flow. The Nigerian advance in East Africa continued. The Germans continued sending troops into Bulgaria, preparing for their upcoming invasion of Greece. And Italy began a new offensive against the Greeks from Albania. That offensive grinds to a halt the middle of this week. Units of the Greek 1st Division, who've repeatedly held off the Italians in the Battle of Hill 731 since the 9th, are finally relieved by those of the 17th Division, the 17th. On the 19th, the Italians do try again and manage to take a piece of Hill 731, but the Greek counterattack takes it back. Attacks and shelling will continue until the 24th, when Mussolini calls off the offensive. The Italians overall take some 12,000 casualties, killed and wounded, for absolutely no gain. The Greeks under half that, and the Battle of Hill 731 has been referred to by some as the Verdun of the Greco-Italian War, as I said last week. This because of not only the staunch defense, but also the vicious close-quarters fighting that was its hallmark, and the terraforming that the endless shelling did to the land, much as you see if you go to the Verdun region of France. The battle, while certainly a morale boost for Greece and great for national pride, also has the downside that it leaves those who fought it exhausted and dangerously short on artillery shells and ammunition for the foreseeable future. Not only that, because of this battle, the Greeks are not able to beef up their forces elsewhere, forces that will likely soon have to face the Germans. They seem to be planning to attack from Bulgaria, but German High Command really wants to use the Yugoslavian railways for the offensive. Yugoslavian regent Prince Paul has resisted pressure for months to join the Axis powers, though after meeting Hitler last week, he pretty much realized that he had to choose Germany or Britain, and realistically, what could Britain possibly offer him? This week, in a meeting of the Royal Council in Belgrade, he makes it known that he is ready to agree to join the Tripartite Pact and even allow German units passage through his country. 4 ministers resign in protest. Street demonstrations soon follow, expressing a strong dislike for Nazi Germany. But again, Paul doesn't think he has much choice if he wants to spare his country from invasion. The official signing to join the Axis powers will happen next week in Vienna. German troops are on the move, though, not only in the Balkans. On the 17th to the north, Adolf Hitler moves armored units of Army Group South to Krakow. The British know this from Enigma intercepts. Also that day, German aircraft appear over the Baltic port of Liepaja. The Soviet naval commander there orders them fired upon, but Joseph Stalin has forbidden this, and the order is rescinded. And when a German reconnaissance plane makes a forced landing near the harbor, they rescue the pilot, they feed him dinner, refuel his plane, and send him on his merry way. Stalin does not want to give the Germans any provocation. Still, on March 20th, his ambassador in Washington, D.C. gets a series of messages of definite German intentions to attack the USSR. Of course, Stalin doesn't know when this will happen. Or does he? See, also on the 20th, the head of the GRU, Soviet intelligence, General Philip Golikov, turns in a report that accurately describes Hitler's planned 3-pronged attack, the names of its commanders, and that the tentative kickoff date is May 20th. But in his conclusion, he writes, "Rumors and documents that war against the USSR is inevitable this spring should be regarded as misinformation coming from the English, or perhaps even the German intelligence service." In fact, Golikov's report even begins by saying that the British and American sources of intel have the goal of which at present is, without a doubt, to worsen relations between the USSR and Germany. He is wrong about a few things. There are also German troop movements in North Africa. Now, these have been taking place since mid-February to assemble a force under Erwin Rommel to safeguard Tripoli. I talked a few weeks ago about how the British and Commonwealth forces they might face there were disposed after being stripped to fortify Greece. That's now changed a bit. 3 motorized Indian cavalry regiments have arrived and are at Martuba, where they can theoretically defend both north and south, though they have no tanks or anti-tank weapons. The support group of the 2nd Armored Division is holding at Mersa Brega, while 5 infantry battalions of the 3rd Australian are to protect Benghazi and make ready to defend the Jebel. They have no artillery, recon, or signals intelligence with them. The rest of them are at Tobruk without sufficient vehicles to be mobile. Rommel, though, has been having vehicle issues himself. Most of Germany's vehicle production is earmarked for the invasion of the Soviet Union, but his force is still slowly building. By now, he's got the German 5th Light Motorized Division and an Italian Armored Division, with only half its tanks. With 4 Italian infantry divisions, he has some 50,000 men. The 5th Light has over 150 light and medium tanks. The medium one with the 50mm gun that packs a wallop, a few 88mm guns, an AA unit, and some motorized infantry armed with anti-tank weapons. For its size, it's a pretty formidable and, importantly, mobile force. His orders were simply to safeguard Tripoli. But by now, with his men in place from El Agheila till Marada, he's done that. So he plans to launch an offensive in May to retake Cyrenaica and then invade Egypt and take the Suez Canal. The current offensives in Africa, though, Allied ones, continue this week. On the 16th, a British force arriving by sea from Aden captures the port of Berbera. Then they advance inland and take Hargeisa the 20th. Further inland, the occupation of Jijiga by the forces that we've seen advance over 1,000 kilometers from the south is the end of the fighting in the flat bush terrain and the beginning of the hill warfare in the highlands. This means that the crucial effectiveness of the British armored cars will only be of limited use. The Nigerians search for some sort of flanking route around Marda Pass. There is nothing to be had, so they decide they'll attack the 23rd. However, they get news the morning of the 21st that the Italians are going to withdraw, and so they decide to attack at once. The following fighting up the pass is fierce for the rest of the day, but inconclusive. But when the Nigerians awaken the next morning, their enemy is gone, pulling back in the night. But though the Marda Pass has fallen, there are still further obstacles on the road to Harar. On the 20th, armored cars from Jijiga make contact with the forces that landed at Berbera. Further north, March 15th, is the first day of the final part of the Battle of Keren, which began and then reached stalemate over a month ago. The evening of the 14th, the RAF manages to blow up a train heading to reinforce Keren from Asmara, carrying 30,000 artillery shells in 40 trucks. The 16th sees the 5th Indian Division take Fort Dologorodak, south of Keren Road. They managed to hold it for the rest of the week, even while exposed to enemy fire from 3 sides and with themselves running out of food and ammunition. The 4th Indian Division, however, is unable to take the peaks and ridges of Sanchil and takes heavy losses trying. March 25th is the date now set for the final push. There is a big push this week, though, by the Japanese. On the 14th, they send 3 columns of men, more than 50,000 troops of the 11th Corps, from Anyi and the river region opposite Nanchang to try and take Shangao and destroy the Chinese nationalist 19th Army, attacking its headquarters. The Japanese do take it the following day, but Chinese airstrikes destroy their supply lines and their ammo and food reserves. This stalls the Japanese advance, and the Chinese use the lull to dig in and reinforce. The Japanese attack again the 17th, but by this time, there are 100,000 Chinese in 3 defensive lines of trenches. The attackers do not even make it through the first line, taking heavy casualties from entrenched Chinese with machine guns. The next day, they attack behind a smoke screen, reach the line, and a vicious hand-to-hand battle follows. Both sides take big casualties, and the Japanese breach the first line of defense. For the rest of the week, there is a lull in fighting after this, as the Japanese call in reinforcements, and the Chinese bring up men and material from the 3rd line to the 2nd. Well, that's one version. Dick Wilson writes, the Japanese sent 50,000 men out in 3 columns from Anyi and from the banks of the Gan River opposite Nanchang on March 15th. 4 days afterwards, the Chinese counterattacked with 8 divisions, and in the course of a 3-day battle, the Japanese retired. Meanwhile, the Japanese left wing had advanced along the Jin River, but was caught, along with other Japanese units, in a Chinese encirclement. Either way, it's not good news for the Japanese. And the Germans get some bad news this week too, from the high seas. On the 17th, Otto Kretschmer's U-99 and Joachim Schepke's U-100 are both sunk in battle with an Allied shipping convoy. Okay, Kretschmer scuttles his ship after it's been disabled, and though 3 of his men die, he and the rest of his crew are captured. As for Schepke, he is not so fortunate, as his U-boat is hit by depth charges, then rammed and sunk, with himself and 37 crew going down. 6 of his crew are rescued. He sunk 34 ships, possibly a few more, in his submarine career, and Kretschmer 47, and the loss of these 2 submarine aces, coming on the heels of Gunther Preen's death 2 weeks ago, is not just a big loss, but a major blow to morale. Those 3 were the 3 brightest stars among the German submarine aces. And with that, I will end the week. A week of fresh fighting in Albania and China, continued fighting in East Africa, and preparations for fighting in North Africa, Bulgaria, and Poland. And Golikov telling Stalin that the stories of Germany planning to attack are just Anglo-American propaganda. Now that is interesting coming from the chief of intelligence. But even Stalin admitted last month at the party conference that Golikov isn't super qualified for his job, being both naive and inexperienced. So why is he there? Well, several former chiefs have been shot or are currently imprisoned, so they may be running out of qualified candidates. And why is he saying that Germany won't attack? Well, he may believe it, but he may just be telling Stalin what Stalin wants to hear. The former chief, Ivan Proskurov, didn't do that. Just before the Winter War against Finland, he wrote a blistering report about the army's unreadiness for combat, and already last June, he warned Stalin that Hitler will prepare to attack the USSR after France falls. But that conflicted with Stalin's belief that Hitler will honor the non-aggression pact they have. So Proskurov was fired and replaced by Golikov. Jumping into the future, on April 4th, Stalin will order Proskurov's arrest. Jumping further into the future, he will be shot in October. Maybe Golikov does know what he's doing. If you'd like to see our Between Two Wars episode about Joseph Stalin's army purges just before this war, you can click right here for that. Our TimeGhost Army member of the week is Douglas Rumbaugh. The TimeGhost Army is what funds all of our programming. So join the army at patreon.com or timeghost.tv. Do not forget to subscribe and ring that bell that looks sort of like this bell, and I will see you next time.